If you think of your own personal idea of an earthly paradise, I'm sure that most of us would have visions of green rolling hills, shady trees and flower-studded meadows, all orchestrated by the song of birds and the buzzing of insects. In other words, the countryside. But in reality, few of us have the good fortune to live in such an Arcadian situation. When we first came, it felt like being in Alcatraz. With an 11-foot wall at the back and 6-foot walls at the sides, there was a desperate feeling of enclosure. It's like that, of course, with many town gardens, and one of our first jobs was to get rid of it. Now, you live right in the centre of town, Geoff, and your garden is overlooked on all sides, really, so it could be quite a public place. And yet, when you come in here, you get a great feeling of peace and tranquility and privacy. Now, how have you managed that?
Well, I suppose this was the most public wall, and there's a public garden there, really, belonging to the pub. And also, there used to be sort of quite a view here of the backs of those buildings. And so I built these brick piers and put this double rail, pergola rail along the top here. And since then it's been clothed with various climbers.
So by hiding the view with plants, you've actually cut off the view from outside, and yet without making it look oppressive.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
They've also created in the garden a series of little private secret corners. Is that for privacy too?
Yes, I think this has developed over the years, really. One's seen the potential of one particular spot. And for example, when we came here, that wall divided the two gardens completely. I could easily have taken down that wall and made it just one single garden, but it seemed to have more three-dimensional sort of possibilities if one simply made an arch in the wall there and had another way through at that end. It gave one a sort of circulation. And it gave me the opportunity of having a north-facing wall as well as a south-facing wall, which was a great advantage, really, because landing on this side is just as interesting as the landing on the sunny side.
Now, you've also used trees quite a bit to create privacy as well.
Yes. Well, the whole of that boundary was planted really to screen that quite large wall. And so the important thing was to get fairly sort of fast-growing, fairly sort of heavy planting in front of it. And so most of that planting on that side is not really to do with privacy, but to do with concealing that sort of heavy boundary. But really, garden design is about creating spaces with a sort of particular character. And I think the planting inside and the space has to have a sort of balance.
A Another way to reduce the claustrophobic effect of the walls is to make the garden look bigger by stealing your neighbour's trees. Well, you just borrow them, really. Now, outside my garden, I've got a couple of big acers here. And what I want to do is to plant another smaller one my side of the wall to make it look like a natural group of 3 plants. Now, that way, the wall will disappear, the garden will look very much bigger, and it'll also hide that ghastly electricity substation. Now, you can, of course, buy small trees and wait for them to grow, but for this particular job, I'm impatient. So I've been down to the garden centre where they stock some pretty big trees. Now, they have the one great disadvantage, of course, that they are expensive. So the preparation and planting has to be really thorough. Now, this consists of 50-50 coarse grit and fine bark. And to that, I've added a bit of organic fertiliser just to give the tree a start. And then with a tree of this size, you're going to need the help of a willing next-door neighbour to plant it. Fine. Okay, then, thanks very much. I can manage now, I think. Now, with big trees, it's absolutely essential to stake them really well. And what you could do with this one is to put up 3 guy ropes all round, but they do look a little bit conspicuous. So I've developed this contraption to actually hold the root ball down. And it just consists of 4 bits of wood screwed together. Of course, there's a very solid root ball underneath here, so these pieces of wood will more or less sit on the top of that. So if I can hold that firm in the ground, the tree isn't going to move. I can then hammer in a peg on each one of these, and that'll hold it pretty firm. Yeah, that should hold it nice and firm. And of course, once the wood's covered with soil, you won't see it at all. This is a medium-sized shrub, Acer palmatum, and once the leaves come on them, all these 3 are going to look terrific.
Both my gardens at Barnsdale are almost square, but many town gardens are long, narrow and straight. With these, careful design is even more important. I remembered my old friend Anne Dexter in Oxford. She solved her major problem of neighbours overlooking her garden on all sides by building upwards in gradual layers.
I've always loved gardening, and so has my mother. And my grandmother especially. She had a huge garden up in Cumberland. And when I came here, I turned the house around to have the sitting room looking out down the so-called garden as it was then. And there was a huge tree in the middle of the lawn, which I had removed. And then I took the top off the lawn and had, I don't know how many square yards of crazy paving brought and dumped. I did the paths on my own. I had it brought through the house, but it was dumped here, and I did it because there was nothing. And luckily, there are a few houses that have walls, and luckily I was one of the ones that had a wall. So I sort of went off from the wall and had a wriggling path going down to the bottom, so that you hopefully didn't see everything at once. And then having done the paths and laid out this bit on this sitting place, I dug out what I'd laid down in the middle, so I could have dry stone walls, because I wanted to grow up small alpines and things like that, and I couldn't have done that in amongst the sugs at the back. Down at the bottom, where it's quite a different atmosphere, I've got all my trilliums and fritillaries, ramondas and abelias. And that is, I dug that out and made the walls for these plants. And it was really just a shade-loving area. So there's that area, and then there's the middle one, and then there's one near the house. You get a variety of different plants and shrubs. And then I suppose from about 3 foot high, all the shrubs that you see now, which are going up to the sky, were very small. But over the years you don't notice it, they just grow and grow. And then it just happened, I suppose, that all the things that I bought, the shrubs and things, which were only about 3 to 4 foot high when I bought them, grew and grew and grew, and it got sort of more and more enclosed. And I can grow far more things when they're growing upwards than I could if, you know, it was all sort of a level. By growing plants that were tall, and then shrubs that were tall, and pruning them, and then I just go up and up and up. I suppose there are about 4 layers, so that I've got all sorts of different shapes and heights in the garden.
Well, the first thing that Anne did when she got into her garden was to increase the height of the fence with a bit of trellis. And if your fence is a bit low, you can do the same thing quite easily. You're unlikely to find that the fencing posts are long enough to take a standard trellis, so I've made up my own here with this 25 by 38 millimetre, that's inch by inch and a half, roofing lard, which you can get from the builder's merchants. And I've included on it an extra leg just here, so that it's quite easy to screw onto the fencing post. And that, of course, will soon be covered with climbers. And to get the climbers to grow up the fencing panels is really quite easy, because you just fix these horizontal wires to the posts with staples. But of course, the name of the game with climbers is fast growth. That's what you really want. But if you want that, you've got to lay the foundations in the first place. And this is the stuff to do it with. Good, well-rotted farmyard manure. Now, the secret of success with any gardening is to get the soil fertile and then to keep it fertile. And if you can't get hold of farmyard manure, well, use spent mushroom compost in the first year, and from then on you can always supplement it with your own garden compost, of course. Now, you'll notice that I've put the manure in up the shoulder of the trench there, so that it will get to all levels of the soil rather than just putting it in the bottom of the trench. And then you simply throw the soil forward to form the next trench and carry on down the row like that. One of my favourite combinations of climbers are roses and clematis, because the rose can be trained up these horizontal wires to the top of the fencing panel, and then the clematis can be planted right alongside it. And bear in mind, these have to go in quite deeply, and that will use the branches of the rose as a framework to climb up to the top of the panel too. But do bear in mind that if you choose varieties that are going to be in flower at the same time, then you've got to be a little bit careful about your colour scheme.
Having hidden the walls and fences with colourful and scented climbers, we can create our own secret places using living things. For centuries, gardeners have used arbours as places to get away from their surroundings. Luckily, there are still young designers and builders around, keeping this tradition alive. Claire Wilkes uses willow for her arbour.
So this is really very much like basket making, isn't it?
Yes, it is, as well as hurdle making, a mixture of the two.
Now you're using here a very bright yellow willow. What is that?
It's an alba, Salix alba, and specifically the Bassbordiana, and just below it is the natural red.
Now the back of the seat there is really just like a willow hurdle, if you like, but the base of it here is actually living. Now how have you achieved that?
Well, this structure of weaving is dead, but through it I've planted all round the base living willow and then threaded it up through and taken it to the back. And then from the back it goes round outside and comes up the top, hoping that they'll get light from the back as well as from in here, because you can't guarantee that they'll all get a lot of sunlight because we're inside the arbour.
And when it does sprout, that means that you're going to have lots of shoots growing up here. Isn't it a bit uncomfortable to sit on?
Well, it depends if you've got stockings on or not, but it's basically little fine shoots, and it's quite fun to sit in the seat and weave them through, and people can't stop fidgeting when they're sitting in a living arbour.
I know that anything living like this really has a bit of a mind of its own, doesn't it? So how have you managed to keep this beautiful shape?
Well, because I've started by planting 15-foot willow wands in, these won't, in fact, change very much. But what will grow is the sprouts off them. So those ones that are planted there, I've twisted over into sort of a series of arches and then woven them round the back, so that there's diagonals which then help create the structure. The willow has all been coppiced a few times, so it's very long and straight, which helps it. It helps make a beautiful, perfect structure. If it was very branchy, I wouldn't be able to get that perfect curve shape.
For my arbour, I'm using hornbeam, which should be just the job. It looks very much like beech, and of course it's widely used for hedging, so it'll clip well, and it retains its brown leaves during the winter. You could, of course, use beech equally well, and I must say that the winter colour is slightly better. But if your soil is a little bit on the poor side, or perhaps badly drained, hornbeam is much easier to grow. You'll have to search out a good tree nursery for plants like these, but they are certainly available. Now, I've marked out the circle, which is 1 metre in diameter, that's 6'6", and I've got space here for about 7 trees, something like 1 metre apart. So I'm planting where the pigs are. If the roots at the bottom of the plant are running round the pot, you'll need to just break them out a little bit. Otherwise, surprisingly, they continue to run round the pot, and that's not good for anchorage. Just firm the soil in a little bit with your heel as you go, but don't set them in concrete. Each tree will now have to be supported with a short stake. I have to admit that they don't look very attractive, but they'll only be there for a year or two, because after that time the trees will set into the shape that you put them. Well, that's the easy part. The difficult bit is pulling the branches over to make arches like this. Now, like many landscape jobs, the only way of knowing that you've got this right is really by eye, so you might have to fiddle around quite a bit with it. And when you tie them together, don't for heaven's sake use wire in this case, because of course it'll cut into the bark and kill the tree. The same goes for any nylon twine. I use this plastic twist lock stuff, which is of course wider, and so it won't cut in, though it is, I have to admit, a bit of a fiddle to fix. Then the next two can be pulled over into the middle in just the same way. They're tied on as well. The whole thing begins to take shape. Around the bottom of my arbour, I'm planting a circular lavender hedge, so that when I sit in here, that delicious perfume will waft upwards, and of course it'll be full of bees and butterflies too. Now, the problem with lavender is that it does like a really well-drained soil, and that's the one thing my soil isn't. So I've worked in around here a whole load of coarse grit to improve the drainage, and they should really thrive on that. Now, it takes, what, 24 lavender to complete this circle, and that could be quite pricey, but in actual fact I raised all these myself from seed. You don't need a greenhouse, they would go perfectly well outside, and I reckon that they cost me something like 10p each, and that's what I call a bargain. Finally, level the floor with a fork, cover it with bark chips, and your arbour will smell like a pine forest in spring. Well, Millie, you've built a lovely secluded little spot in your garden up here, surrounded by shrubs and shaded by this huge walnut tree. Do you use it very much?
Well, it was beautiful in the spring. We brought lots of people up to see the bluebells, cowslips, primroses. It was really lovely, and children loved to come up and run all up that garden and through that gap in the, well, it's a sort of hedge there, and they call it, well, we'll go through to the secret garden. They love that. We do have picnics. When the weather's really hot, it's always, you can always find coolness up here. In fact, sometimes it's so cool you have to move out into the sun to warm up again. But I love the tree. You used to actually bring stuff
to lay down here, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, we always loved getting right flat down, didn't we? It's a bit more of an effort to get up now, but we still do. Yeah. It's really relaxing. Lovely. And the tree is beautiful. I mean, the bark is fantastic, isn't it? I love it. It was lovely when we had the owls with jackdaws about. We get hedgehogs up here, don't we? I see those running around. I come up quite late sometimes just to see what there is around.
You get a few squirrels here too, don't you?
Yes, we don't welcome those very much, really. They really are rather a pest. They're lovely to see, aren't they? So acrobatic, but...
Horace, you had an unfortunate experience with a squirrel here once, didn't you?
Yes. We were lying down, taking it easy, you know, in a heat wave. And all of a sudden, it was a lovely blue sky like it is today. All of a sudden, there were some spots of moisture, whatever it was, coming down. So Millie got up and looked over the wall, the chap's garden next door, thinking he'd got a sprinkler on, but no, there was nothing of that. So after a while, we found out what it was. There was a squirrel straight up above us. And he was just weeing down.
Really? What I love about this place is the fact that you've got this lovely dappled light. That's beautiful.
Beautiful. That's one thing about a walnut tree. It's never too dense, is it? You can always see the sky through it, and the sun always comes down through it. One of my friends said she hoped she wasn't being over fanciful, but she feels as if she's walking into a cathedral when she comes up here at sunset. The setting sun gives a sort of stained glass effect to the light through the walnut tree. And she's a very down-to-earth person, actually, so I was quite surprised.
There's something quite magical about the woodlands in the springtime. And of course, it's countryside like this that has been the inspiration for our gardens. Over the centuries that man has been creating gardens, we've come to realise their value as peaceful, tranquil places for contemplation and reflection. Green was considered a colour which was particularly conducive to contemplation, reflection, prayer and study. It was also considered important to lift the spirits with the colour and perfume of flowers. So next week, I'll show how to design your garden for colour.